This is 8-Minute Climate Fix, a podcast helping you understand the energy and climate challenge in just a few minutes. I'm your host, Paul Schuster. Over the last few episodes, I've spent a lot more time talking about AI and the impact on climate. Embedded in that, and kind of taken for granted, is that building all of these new data centers is going to jack up costs too. And affordability is a big topic right now. There's a lot of PR, marketing, and just plain misinformation out there on the effect that data centers are having on those rising utility rates that you're seeing on your monthly bill. So let's dive into and understand why exactly data centers are putting the strain on everyone. 8 minutes. It's how long it takes the sun's race to hit Earth, or, well, the US brought about 2.5 gigawatts of new data center load onto the grid last year, or roughly 38 kilowatts of capacity every 8 minutes, roughly equivalent to 4 new homes, or the scale of a small town every day. It's gonna be a problem. Let's get it on. You may have heard about the Trump administration touting something called the Ratepayer Protection Pledge from earlier this year. The pledge required hyperscalers wanting to build new AI data centers to, first, ensure that they're bringing new generating capacity to fulfill the power needs of the facility, and second, cover all of the transmission and distribution costs required to connect to the grid so that ratepayers won't be burdened with increased costs. Sounds easy, right? Well, okay. Having data centers bring their own power, BYOP, isn't a bad thing, but it doesn't cover nearly enough of the overall cost of connecting these large load data centers to the grid. Duke Energy filed their requested rate increases back in November and asked for an increase of 18% to utility rates for residential homeowners. The reason? Data centers. Bringing your own power just isn't enough. The reasons why lie in how power markets are constructed. Let's think about it in 4 different ways. First, the way that new generation is brought online really matters. If the new power sits behind the meter and is essentially operationally controlled by the data center, providing 100% uptime to their needs and specifications, utilities don't love seeing that. They basically look at the new data center's load as very real, but don't count the power capacity as something that they can count on. Put it another way, the data center is using the grid as backup, and the utility needs to factor in the worst-case scenario of the new power facility going down, but the load staying online, which requires additional generation to be built in the system to cover that reliability concern. In essence, building the power twice. And guess who pays for that additional build-out? The second thing stressing pricing is something called a capacity charge. Basically, electrical system operators have to balance certain periods of the day when power needs tend to spike. These peak periods are going to require short-term generating assets to come online to balance out those spikes in demand. And in order to ensure that those units are available when they may be needed, a capacity payment is paid out by the systems operator to those facilities. It's basically an insurance policy to make certain that there's enough power available when needed. Naturally, all of those capacity payments are socialized across the consumer base as a capacity charge. Now, as data centers push the need for power up in the region, even the ones generating their own power, because again, if something happens to that primary source, the utility needs to plan for the worst case peak scenario, well, there increases the need for more capacity. And here's where it gets worse, because the capacity market clears at the highest price, which means that when the systems operator goes searching for new capacity, they won't just pay those additional units $1 or $2 more. They pay everyone participating in the capacity market $1 or $2 more. The result? PJM, the systems operator that controls everything from Virginia to Illinois, saw capacity prices explode from $30 per megawatt day to $270 per megawatt day, a 9-time increase. That equals a total of $9.7 billion, or about $18 per month for every homeowner in the region. Bring your own power doesn't change that math. So we've talked backup power needs, capacity pricing. Then there's the socialization of new transmission costs. These new data centers are stressing the grid, not only with how many are coming online, but the fact that each of them is really honking big to begin with. And that's requiring a substantial investment on the part of utilities into transmission upgrades. Duke Energy's filing was unambiguous in this regard. They made it easy for us and tied the need for $1.3 billion in transmission infrastructure back to 60 investments tied to those large loads. Those costs, yeah, they're borne by everyone. And then the last item to talk about is the wholesale price contagion. See, most of our electricity markets operate by setting a different price at different nodes. We're not all paying the same price everywhere. Over in England, they actually do pay the same price for electricity, regardless of whether you live in London or Newcastle. But here in the US, we split the grid into thousands of individual nodes that each have a price, something called a locational marginal price, or LMP. And the reason why is because the grid is trying to balance demand at different points in the network through price signals. If a transmission line in one area gets overloaded and they need to back power off of it before it melts, jack that price up in that area super high and see if consumers will respond. Now, add a data center into the mix, one that's going to absolutely stress the existing transmission in that area. LMPs in and around new data centers can jump significantly, which, yes, affects that data center, but it also affects everyone else who is being priced at that node. Live within a couple miles of a new data center? Your settlement price may have just shot up from $40 to $170. Live a couple more miles away and are settling at a different node, and you may still be seeing $40. This contagion is sometimes overstated in the media as though bringing a data center online immediately raises wholesale prices everywhere. It doesn't. But it does have an impact on those communities in the nearby area that may already be dealing with noise, water, and environmental concerns from these facilities, which is one of the reasons why communities are starting to push back so hard on data center installations in their areas. A Reuters Ipsos poll just this year found that 57% of Americans want nothing to do with data centers in their area. Even the ones that bring their own power, it still adds costs. Costs in developing backup power, in developing transmission infrastructure, in higher capacity markets, and for those nearby, higher wholesale pricing. All that being said, data centers in the AI economy should be an economic boon for communities, but our rate and market structures are set up to really handle different types of build. It's not a simple matter of just offsetting new load with new generation. It requires systemic rethinking of the tariffs, policies, and regulations surrounding this new type of build-out. But as long as data centers are sprinting forward, thinking that they can just build their way out of this, and utilities are incentivized to simply build as much infrastructure as they can, who's looking out for the residential consumer? We need systemic reform quickly before this gets out of hand. I'm Paul Schuster, and this has been your 8 Minutes.